Clerk. Good evening, everybody. Today's day is Tuesday, March 18th, 2014. This is a City Council Economic Development Subcommittee meeting. Roll call, please, Madam.
Councilor Belanger?
Here.
Councilor Kennedy?
Here.
Councilor Martin?
Here.
Councilor Rourke?
Here.
Four present.
Thank you. First on the agenda this evening is an update from DPD regarding the Air City plan. So do we have a representative here? Thank you. That's okay. You sure? Okay. Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Chairman. Members of the City Council, I have tonight the Air City Industrial Park Urban Revitalization and Development Project, better known as the Tanner Street Urban Renewal Plan we've been working on for the last few years. Again, I'm Craig Thomas, the Urban Renewal Project Manager in the Department of Planning and Development. So we're going to walk through a little bit here. This is a much abbreviated version of a full presentation that, if this group is so desirous to send to the council for a future public hearing, will be a part of that public hearing. I'm going to talk a little bit about the background of urban renewal in the city of Lowell, get into the details of the Air City Industrial Park Plan. Again, this is the new moniker for the Tanner Street Corridor Plan, and then talk about the next steps for plan approval. And please, at any time, with any questions, just cut me off and let me know. So just as a little bit of background, the benefits of urban renewal and the way we've used them in the city of Lowell, there are really three main benefits that we seek from a state-designated urban renewal plan. We have both the local approval of the plan, and we send it to the Department of Housing and Community Development of the state for approval. With the designation, the city can act like a private redevelopment authority or private developer in furtherance of the plan objectives, buying and selling and working for redevelopment objectives, sometimes in partnership with private redevelopers and sometimes of our own accord. In addition, we have enhanced grant opportunities, both because applications to the state get additional points scored for applications from urban renewal areas. In addition, it enhances our ability to use our CDBG funding in different parts of the city. Finally, we found that the public planning process that's a part of the urban renewal plan development and approval is helpful to build community stakeholders and build buy-in in the plan, but also as new initiatives develop at the state, it allows us to react quickly and say, we have a plan that's been through a series of public hearings and public approval process, and we have a real buy-in and real consensus around something that we want to do. And that's really given us a leg up in competition for a variety of things at the state level, and actually at the federal level too. So urban renewal in 2000. In 2000, the city had already done much, had achieved a lot of success in redevelopment, particularly when downtown with some of the mill redevelopments. But there were, as I try to illustrate here, some real needs, both in the Acre neighborhood as well as in the Jam neighborhood, the Jackson, Appleton, Middlesex neighborhood. And the city sought to establish the two urban renewal areas that we currently have today. These areas, to establish the districts is really, you have to show that it's something that's both on the local level, something we all believe in, and that is a benefit to the community. What the state really looks for is a showing that these areas are not capable of being redeveloped on their own through private market forces, through developers' interest, through redevelopment projects, but yet there's been a cycle of disinvestment such that we have to take targeted public actions to try and restart private redevelopment in these areas. And so today, we know much about the success we've had in the Jam Plan Hamilton Canal District. We built the early garage as well as totally reconstructed Jackson Street and Canal Street. This has helped to leverage the private redevelopment of the Appleton Mills, Loft 27, Cotton House Lofts, the Counting House Lofts, which are under construction, the Lowell Community Health Center, and Mill number 5, which is under construction. In the Acre, we've completed significant redevelopment projects, including the Stock Closer School, Senior Center and Rite Aid, and the Market Basket, as well as infill residential reconstruction of Marion Street, which is now Cork Street, Suffolk Street, and Fletcher Street to rebuild the fabric of those areas. So what do we have for Air City Industrial Park? This vision statement was crafted in conjunction with the Citizens Advisory Committee, which included the neighborhood leaders for Sacred Heart and the Lower Highlands, as well as a series of state and federal government employees and city administration officials. And this was brought before several public meetings in 2012 and 2013, And the vision statement is really that the Air City Industrial Park, the Tanner Street corridor, should be an active, economically vital, attractive, and sustainable commercial and industrial district that preserves the existing businesses to the greatest extent possible, promotes the area to attract new businesses, provides new connections to make it a true destination for employment, that people want to relocate their businesses to bring employees or to hire new ones here, and that it creates and enhances an appreciation for the natural resources and amenities in that area. Oh, sorry to go back a slide. This vision is a part of a 20-year plan. The urban renewal plans are generally 20 years. They can be 20, 25, or sometimes 30. But the city's desire has been, with the two existing plans and with this plan, to seek a 20-year plan so that we have the time available to meet the requirements for the redevelopment proposed, but at the same time, we have a reasonable and achievable project on our hands. This is the project boundary. If you've been to previous public hearings on this, you might know that it's a little bit smaller. We changed it to align with the railroad to the northeast, the Lowell connector, generally Plain Street, and then along Canada and Maple Street for two reasons. One, we removed a former area north of the railroad because as we analyzed that area, it seemed to be that around Congress Street, both the businesses and the residences were in very good shape, and there weren't really any city actions that could be of help to stabilizing those neighborhoods. In addition, there's a change around just south of Canada Street, and that's actually to remove any residential properties from this plan. There's a topographic change as you come down to Tanner Street there, and the boundary just north of Plain Street, the sort of jagged piece, follows that topography to make this truly an industrial and commercial plan. This is not proposed, as like the other plans, to be a mixed-use plan, but rather a commercial and industrial plan to generate job growth and tax-based support. So when we looked at the area, as we started to do the planning for this, we tried to understand what was going on in and around Tanner Street. Within the boundaries, we see almost a third of the area is right-of-way. That's generally and largely the Lowell connector. There's also a significant amount of vacant land where we see much of the redevelopment opportunity, and that's the brown areas on this map. In addition, there's existing industrial, which is the base that we're trying to build around. Those are the green uses on the map, and that there are a significant group of auto-related uses, which are generally the blue uses. And in trying to understand the true potential for this district, we realized under the existing zoning, we could have up to 6 million square feet of space, but currently we see only 600,000. There's real opportunity to expand and provide new opportunities in this district. So as we tried to understand what we could redevelop in this area, we tried to explore the opportunities for new infill development and while we also preserve what was on the street. So we looked at the areas, again, that were both vacant, and we thought there was opportunities for change in the near term. Those are generally the red areas. We also looked at some of the issues to redevelopment on the site, which are title, both issues of unknown ownership, and environmental impairments, which should be obvious in an area with still residents at its core. We also see a significant number of buildings that are functionally obsolete. So we used our analysis of where we saw the opportunity for the most likely opportunity for redevelopment to try, and while trying to understand what could go there based on our advantages, which include lower relative costs, highway access, educational infrastructure, and city government partnership, with what we found to be in demand right now, which are small, flexible industrial spaces and retail, to develop our redevelopment proposal. And so this is what we see as the potential for Air City Industrial Park around Tanner Street. We have, as listed here, 8 sub-districts. They're not really called out in a particular way, but 8 areas where we see significant redevelopment potential with the opportunity for more than 330,000 square feet of new development, overwhelmingly industrial with some retail development. So to achieve that, the state requires that we propose actions that can help to realize those goals. The first is in some of the redevelopment areas, we have existing buildings, many of which are functionally obsolete. So we're proposing selected demolition of a small number of sites in furtherance of those plans. In addition, we designate, as we have in the other urban renewal areas, potential acquisition parcels. Now, these do not commit the city to any specific actions, but rather this designation allows the city to act as a redevelopment partner as these areas where we've targeted for redevelopment, or any really within the district, but in particular where we assign these designations, the city can be a partner to help facilitate a transaction if there's a need for us or there's a role we can play, or if there's not, this doesn't prevent private redevelopment from occurring without city partnership. And then this leads to, again, the redevelopment areas, which, again, as the state looks for a specific plan for how this would happen, we have selected demolition, potential acquisition, and then disposition of the city selling those potential assets. So the key infrastructure elements we see to facilitate this redevelopment, there's a Tanner Street realignment, which I'll get to in the next slide. There's we're looking at the Lowell connector for a safety upgrade. There's, and contained in the plan, again, from Plain Street and the edge of the district through to the end of Gorham, the concept of reducing the width of the paved area, or at least narrowing the lanes and reducing the lanes to create a boulevard feel. There's significant safety issues at the end of the connector with the way it abruptly reduces speeds and ends at a brick wall that has been knocked out several times, as many of us know. So we're trying to find ways to improve the safety in that area. And the feeling is if we can make it feel like drivers are transitioning from a highway environment to a city urban environment, that we can help to slow them down and again reduce the accidents and the speeding. We're also proposing streetscape improvements on Tanner Street and Manufacturer Street, and new gateways and new connections to connect Canada Street and Maple Street, to connect the Gallagher Station better across YMCA Drive so that folks who want to come to work in this area from the bus station have a clearer path, and to enhance the underpasses. Again, the Tanner Street realignment we see as a near-term critical goal. The goals of this would be to enhance the redevelopment potential of the rear parcels in the district, to accommodate increased traffic from the new development, and to create a new gateway. Sorry, that's the only time I see that acronym, which is the Air City Industrial Park. We looked at several realignment alternatives, and this was selected, again, the red line. This is the existing Tanner Street here, and this is the proposed realignment. Although we haven't done more significant engineering work than this, we see this as an ease of maneuverability for trucks. This brings this Tanner Street end into the signalized intersection with the Target Plaza. One of the big benefits would be, again, trucks can wait at a light and make a left instead of either trying to go down Tanner Street now, or as many do, they sneak down Main Street in the residential area. So we're hoping this can pull some trucks back off from the residential area to the site, as well as this location was chosen to minimize the impacts of these existing businesses. It's our belief that this can maintain all the businesses at the end of Tanner Street. The operations may not be exactly as they are now, but the buildings themselves can be kept whole, and that it can maximize the redevelopment potential of the parcels in that area. There are a couple of green space amenities. Again, this is not a big focus of this plan, but there are some opportunities both for the neighborhood and for the area. We have, within the Lowell connector right-of-way, a significant width to create a walking trail or a natural resource opportunity along River Meadow Brook, as well as a pond behind Maple Street, which could potentially be a neighborhood amenity, and a small park here on Cambridge Street. So this is the project plan. This is in the draft plan that you all received at the beginning of February, but this spells out the individual activities and projects that I've described. And the outcomes that from the redevelopment we're proposing are brownfields cleanup, more than 330,000 square feet of new development, hundreds of new employment opportunities, up to and over $1 million new annual tax revenues, transformation of Lowell connector, greenways, and gateways. So the next steps from here, in addition to questions, which is the next slide and the obvious one, if this subcommittee is so desirous, again, later tonight in the subcommittee report, we'd recommend proposing a motion to set a public hearing date of April 15th for the full council to receive a more significant, more detailed, review of this proposal. That date gives us enough time to meet both the statutory requirements for notice, but as well as to make sure everyone knows what we're doing, to put notice in the paper, to send letters to all the property owners, and to hold public meetings, one of which we have scheduled tomorrow night at the LRTA at 6 p.m. So I know that was a brief overview of the plan that you received in your packets. It's a lot of material, and again, in furtherance, if this meets with the general approval of this body, to send it forward to a public hearing and a further review with the council on April 15th.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you for that briefing, and I also like to recognize a few of my colleagues that are here this evening. Mayor Elliott is here in attendance. Councilor Murcia, Councilor Milanazzo, and Councilor Samaras are also on hand. But Craig, thank you for the briefing. This is certainly an area that's been neglected for a long, long time. And, you know, we want to see some action there. I know we all feel that way. So how much of this property is city-owned? What percentage at this point, you know?
Actually, a very small percentage. There are a series of properties that are owned by the city that we acquired through tax title foreclosure, but they're very small. They're typically along River Meadow Brook. There are, I believe, 4 in the tax title foreclosure process that we could foreclose upon in relative short order. 3 of those parcels are the Silresum site. So again, that's forms a reason that we receive money from the EPA to help with this planning process, and is a critical element for city action to try and overcome real and perceived issues with contamination, to show that redevelopment can occur here, both with potential public partnership and maybe fully private redevelopment.
Yeah, this has been an industrial site for many years, so we can imagine we're going to have issues there with the site, I'm sure.
Yeah, and this is why we crafted a plan to maintain this as an industrial area, as opposed to trying to mix in other uses that are potentially in fad in other areas. That's not what we're looking at here. We're looking at a very simple and straightforward plan to try and build an industrial base again, to reestablish jobs and reestablish tax base.
Yeah, good. And I see no residentials in the plan?
No, there's one property within the boundary that is a single-family house, but it's been vacant when we've reviewed it, and it's not proposed to remain residential, nor is it zoned residential.
Okay, well, that's good. I don't think this is the place for residential, to be quite honest. But thank you for the briefing. Any comments from my colleagues?
Yeah.
Councilor Martin?
Yeah, thank you, Craig. And I know there's been a lot of work gone in to date. I know that followed a little bit the Citizen Advisory Committee process. I know a number of us, I've attended some of those meetings, and another number of other councilors have as well. And they've been well attended, which was encouraging to hear. At least the most recent one I went to had quite a few people at it. Following up on Silresum, so there was one of the charts in the report that talked about properties impacted by the Silresum site.
Yes.
Now, you know, years ago I was on the Conservation Commission, and we had the EPA in, and you know, they said we're looking at a 20 to 30 year plan, so everybody just kind of lost interest. But now we're at that time frame. It's hard to believe that much time has gone by. So what is the plan to deal with Silresum, and what other properties are impacted? What's the plan to deal with those properties?
Yep, so if I can go back here to the redevelopment proposal. So Silresum is in this section right here. What you can actually see is this large proposed industrial building is on the rear parcel of Silresum, which is 3 parcels, 2 off of Tanner Street here and 1 in the back. We've actually been working with our partners at the state and federal environmental agencies to understand the redevelopment potential, and it looks like in the very near term we have an opportunity to pursue redevelopment for the rear section of Silresum. Unfortunately, the groundwater treatment system will remain on the front portion, and that maintains a longer timeline that they are sort of hesitant to give us firm dates for. But that this area could potentially be available, and in some ways that rear may be easier to redevelop than the sections next to it, because that has significant depth of clean fill that was actually installed with the eye to redevelopment in the future. So the cap on that rear portion is capable of holding a building. The most impacted areas are D along here, which is directly adjacent, as well as a portion of C here. This is behind the existing and 2 remain scannel boiler works here. And the answer to your question is that this may be a place where public partnership will be really critical to bring to bear public EPA assessment dollars or even cleanup dollars. The city's been very successful, has a very strong partnership with the EPA in accessing their grant funds. And this is one of the items that the city can offer as a part of the urban renewal plan.
So the groundwater treatment is going to stay, but are we talking about soil contamination too on these adjacent sites that needs to be addressed?
So, to the best of my knowledge, the soil contamination was addressed immediately, directly on the Silresum parcel. It was a dig and haul where they pulled the top feed off and reinstalled the clean cap. And I may or may actually know better than me on this. But the adjacent areas do experience an underwater groundwater plume. That's the known contamination. It's unknown immediately if there is surface contamination on those sites from Silresum, at least to the best of my knowledge. But because of its history as an industrial area, and in particular with D as a auto scrapyard, there are certain to be soil contamination potentially related to Silresum, but more likely unrelated.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So I had other questions too. So you said under existing zoning, we could build maybe 6 million square feet, yet this plan is 330,000.
Yes.
So it seems, I mean, are we underachieving here? Why aren't we higher?
Again, it's a mix of trying to preserve to the greatest extent possible the existing businesses and to build around a relatively successful core while also creating as much new opportunity as possible. So 6 million is a review of the total land area and the FAR, which is the floor area ratio, or how dense how dense one is allowed to build there. So these are proposed as single-story industrial buildings. They could potentially be two-story, in which case we'd double that number of square feet. But again, that's based on the market conditions.
Do you know what the FAR is?
The existing FAR, I think that was as a part of that. Yes, the existing FAR is 0.2 and the potential is 2. So.
And then my last, what about funding sources, estimates of cost, any of that?
Yep, that's in the plan itself, and that, again, trying to keep this to, I know we have 2 items on the subcommittee tonight, so to try and keep this as an introduction to be set to a public hearing, hopefully again April 15th with the City Council, that there is a budget in the plan, and actually feedback we've received from the state on this is that we have proposed funding sources in there, but they want us to tie more directly our proposed actions to those funding sources. So that will be in the, one of the minor updates that will be in the final version of the plan before the council.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Martin. Councilor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'd like to say it's a good presentation, and I appreciate the fact that you made an effort to make it brief in order that we can get this whole meeting in. You talked about the realignment of Tanner Street and moving it out, and I'm assuming that that does 2 things. It, first of all, would make add depth to some of the lots there, but also the primary reason is because of traffic. Is that correct?
Yes, we found a condition that was exacerbated by construction on the Plain Street bridges for the Lowell connector, but remains where the queues from the light on the off-ramp and the on-ramp for the connector back up and block the entry to Tanner Street. So again, to create a more attractive gateway for trucks, and especially if we're looking to increase significantly truck traffic, we'll need to provide a better entrance. In addition, because of that issue with the queuing and that with the end of Tanner Street being blocked, we have seen trucks sneaking out and down Main Street in the residential area. We're trying to create disincentives for that so that we can have a stronger enforcement hand on that.
Okay, do you have a cost estimate of what it would cost to realign that street in terms of takings and everything else?
Yeah, we worked with a consultant. We figure ballpark of $1 million to $2 million. It's hard to know because we haven't done any geotech work. But for example, the Jackson Street extension, which I recently received full cost estimates from our consultant, is not that much longer than that. And the estimate they gave for just that section was about $600,000. So if you add in some additional acquisition as well as enhanced utility relocation for this project versus that, but it's hard to say with any amount of specificity without knowing exactly what's going on underneath the ground and what we'll need to do, especially because that will necessitate a slight shift in the wall in the VFW parcel.
Are there a lot more takings necessary to do this than to do Jackson Street?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm simply comparing them for cost purposes.
Right.
Yep.
My question, I guess, was the takings, but you don't know. You don't know. Nobody's estimated that. The eminent domain takings and so forth?
No, we have not done cost estimates for that, no.
Okay. And you mentioned doing something to change the connector into a more boulevard type thing so that
Yes.
there would be a transition to slow people down?
Yes.
And that would be something that probably we would be concerned about on the inbound side rather than the outbound side, I would imagine. But the connector right now is above grade, and the connector right now is above grade in part because it has to clear obstacles.
Yep.
So how do you do that? How do you change that around and what do you do to change that around?
That's a very good question. And again, one of the things I cut out of this was an explanation of the cross-section for that. At a point in this planning process, we had posited the idea of lowering the connector to at grade, at least say in the area of Cambridge Street, so that there might be a new gateway to the Tanner Street area to improve access, as well as potentially the neighboring residential area. Now, we heard that the residential area to the northwest, was part of Lower Highlands, didn't necessarily want additional access. In addition, while we were exploring the opportunity for lowering the connector, there are a variety of reasons that it's not feasible. It was always a big idea concept, but the need to get over Plain Street, as you very correctly point out, and then back over the railroad again, that the opportunity to lower it is very limited, and any access to Tanner Street in the Cambridge Street area would be complicated both by a new bridge over River Meadow Brook and actually by weaving movements from the cars coming onto the connector from the inbound Plain Street ramp. So we abandon any change to the elevation. Rather, what we're proposing is within the existing right-of-way and the existing structure to shrink the lane widths and reduce from 3 to 2 the number of lanes, and add trees to try and, again, just give the sense that this is an urban area to slow cars down and improve safety.
Okay, let's say that we have great success with this area and that there is a lot of development. There would need to be more access and egress than what exists now. And so how would that work?
So one of the other, again, absolutely agreeing, it's a point well taken. One of the other elements, you can actually see it here, is to reconnect Canada, or to connect, I'm not certain if they were ever connected, Canada Street and Maple Street, such that there's another industrial corridor that can bring traffic in, and deliveries, workers, et cetera, that can bring them in from the far side from Gorham Street.
Well, it's the interstate that I would imagine everybody's going to want to get to, right? It's, in other words, that if you're coming from Gorham Street, then that would be fine. But I guess it seems to me that it would be access to the interstate and egress to the interstate. That's where you'd want to go. So what would you do about that?
Again, the main proposal in that regard is the Tanner Street realignment, to bring it into the signalized intersection with Target. So again, not just that we can move it farther away from the connector, we can actually have a signal there that we can time as needed for the redevelopment and the actual traffic patterns we see in the area. The concern with access is the reason we looked so seriously at the concept of lowering the connector and connecting at Cambridge Street. But in some ways, our hands are tied a little bit in that regard. So we're trying to make the best we can of the available ideas, and this seemed to be the best opportunity.
Okay. When we're talking about access and egress, wouldn't that be contrary to wanting to reduce the number of lanes from 3 to 2 in order to slow people down? I mean, might there not be some other type of solution rather than to reduce lanes in order to do that? If the area is successful, you're going to want more lanes, not less lanes.
Again, I absolutely agree, and it's a little bit of a consideration about where we try and drive people. So the focus on Tanner Street realignment is in the hopes of driving people off of the connector at the Plain Street exit, where it will remain, even under this proposal, as a limited access highway. They can then take a right and then a left at the signalized intersection. Folks who are going all the way down to come in the other side, there's some potential of that, but we'll really be driving what we'd see to be the major traffic impact, which would be enhanced truck traffic in that direction. From Plain Street to Gorham Street, the end of the connector is really actually not aimed at this redevelopment, but more the general use of that by all the folks who enter our city, the residents, and anyone who works here or just wants to visit. Based on the traffic volumes there, we believe we can reduce the lane numbers by 1 and lane widths without negatively impacting the travel times there. Again, in the thought that most of the entrance to this district will be coming off of the Plain Street exit from the Lowell connector, will remain a highway.
Okay. In your early remarks, you suggested that the place had potential for industrial and commercial development.
Yes.
What did you mean by, but then later on you said, but not mixed uses. And so what type of commercial development did you?
Yep, we really mean retail in that regard. If we look here, and mixed uses, what I mean typically is residential mixed with anything else. That's most often what that means, but thank you for the clarification on that. Here we have, again, proposed industrial spaces in the heart of the vacant and available space, as well as in and around Tanner Street. The commercial and really retail opportunities are along Plain Street. This is the Target building here, so we see along Plain Street in the car wash and VFW site, as well as on the manufacturer's street side behind McDonald's and Mahoney's Oil.
Okay, all right, so it's really just the property that would front along Plain that you would, that little section.
Yeah.
And then my last question, I think, would be, what this needs to get off the ground really is a catalyst. And so would you see that the development would begin at Plain Street and then work itself in? I mean, this district right now is it is a heavy industrial district, underutilized and probably has tired industrial properties. But nevertheless, it's probably the only heavy industrial area left in the city. And so to get it going, you know, and there's property owners there that I'm sure are making money. You know, everybody's not losing money up there. And so maybe I'm getting off track here a little bit. So how would you see that happening first? Would it happen along Plain Street, and should we be looking for a catalyst, or should we be doing something to try to bring in a catalyst to get the thing going? I mean, I guess what I would think, and maybe I'm incorrect, is that for instance, where the car wash is, that would probably be the primary site. And then you'd have a sort of a domino thing where somebody would see what was done there and then want to do something next door and so forth, all the way to Silverism. Is that how you see it, or is it?
I think there are 3 opportunities for catalyst projects, or you know, some sort of catalytic investment to kickstart this initiative. And I agree totally that one opportunity is to start at Plain Street and build inward. This is why we look at the Tanner Street realignment as a new gateway, so folks understand that there's a new redevelopment initiative here, that we're trying to put energy and time into redeveloping this area, maintaining the existing businesses to the greatest extent of our abilities, and to maintaining its industrial character. But we could potentially come in from Plain Street, which is why I focused a little bit on the Tanner Street realignment. In addition, I see the opportunities around the Silverism rear parcel as one where the city may be able to attract state and federal funding, because it's to redevelop for active industrial use, a Superfund site. I think there's a lot of interest in the community, the environmental agencies at the state and federal level, and a lot of opportunity to work with them in a site that's really unlikely to see any private redevelopment without city action there. And finally, again, the reason we explore this and propose actions and acquisition parcels is the ability to work with private redevelopers. If someone has come in and just the act of holding public meetings and reviewing this area has initiated a few interesting conversations, in particular about the area in the back there labeled C for transformative redevelopment, and that if an opportunity presents itself, the city will aggressively pursue opportunities to build out the industrial base.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councilor Kennedy. Councilor Rourke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Craig, thank you very much for the presentation. Getting to the funding resources, whether through state, federal, or even through grants, are there deadlines that have to be followed, or I know you want to get here for April 15th for a public hearing.
Yep.
Is there certain dates that have to be met in order to get certain grant or funding?
So there's a mix here. The April 15th date is really the date that we're targeting because it continues the progression of this plan. As we brought it forward now for public conversation, we want to make sure that we're working diligently to bring it forward, at least for public hearing, that people have opportunity to comment, that the council has an opportunity to see a more robust presentation, that we go into some of the details that we're getting at here. But the grants that we typically target are more project specific, and the deadlines are more likely tied to what we propose. And so this is another reason why these urban renewal plans have a longer time horizon, so that we can go after funding, and when they say, does this meet your redevelopment proposal, we can say it definitely does. We have undertaken a significant planning process here. We have an open window for this project, and your grant horizon fits within it. Thus, we can and will be able to complete your project. It'll have these transformative effects. So all of that is really about the grant timelines, which are a future project after designation of the district and initiation of some of the more near-term elements we have, including looking at financing and zoning changes.
Great, thanks. And with regards, I know we just spoke a minute ago about the Tanner Street and the idea of bringing in business there. Has those conversations with private companies already taken place of possibilities of going in those areas?
Yes, again, the act of discussing this publicly and bringing this forward has initiated some exploratory conversations, nothing, unfortunately, concrete enough to really propose or discuss in any specific way. But the redevelopment community and the private developers and private manufacturers really look at partnership, the city's willingness to engage and partner in site preparation and redevelopment as a significant asset to their site planning and location selection. And so we've been very successful in being proactive in the other urban renewal areas, and that's why we seek to do the same here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Chair would like to recognize Acting Manager, Mr. Geary.
Thank you, Councilor Belanger. Just a quick note. I think this development is kind of critical to the city as a whole. You look at the jam plan, you look at the acre plan. We've invested a lot of resources, invested a lot of time and a lot of effort. This plan deserves just as much because It focuses on the industrial element and the commercial element, which I think is critical in that area especially. I think the things that the council has mentioned in terms of Ceresum and the connector are two factors that I think are going to play heavy in this development area, and they've got to be addressed because it is a perfect industrial area. But I think there's some access issues that have to be addressed, and I think there will be. It's just the urban renewal is important because I think it takes that residential element out. I think if you get the industrial element down there, it increases that tax base, it increases your revenue to the city, and it's a 20-year project. If you just think back, if we don't do anything, what's it going to look like in 20 years? So I think the businesses down there need a public input. I think the public should stay involved there, and as we move forward, I think this will become even more crystallized and be, a gem that we can hold out like the jam plan, like the acre plan sometime in the future. You'll all still be here, I may not.
Well put, Mr. Manager. I think we would all agree in those comments, the importance of this project. Okay, at this point, I think I'll open up to the public. Is there anybody like to comment on the Air City plan at this point? Air City plan? Hearing none, that portion of the meeting is now closed. What is the wish of this body? Any comments, questions? Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor Elliott? Sorry, okay. Councilor Milanazo first? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a few questions, but I know in the interest of time, I'll hold them till the public hearing. But one question, and Greg, thank you for the presentation, has to do with the Lenergia power plant. What's the status of the Lenergia power plant? Does that fall within the urban renewal district or just outside the district?
It is within the district, but again, it's this building here. Again, we have no proposed action there because it seems to be in good working order. We explored creative opportunities for cogeneration, adding steam heat for that district, trying to reduce heating costs, but the infrastructure made it not cost competitive with the existing sources. And we're in communication with this plan with the owners, and the reason you don't see it online more is it's my understanding it's a peak plant, so they only flip the service on when the cost of electricity goes above a certain level.
Okay. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Councilor. Mayor Elliott?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just real quickly, on the Silresum site, you are correct. It's essentially 3 parcels. As recent as last week, I did have a conversation with the RPM, and the project that was conducted back in 2011 with $14.5 million of federal funds using electrical resistant heating, that project is done. They took out 50,000 pounds of VOCs. That being said, the challenge with Silresum at this point is ownership. And in order to proceed with reuse, there needs to be ownership, so then EPA can start talking about deed restrictions. So I'm not sure who would initiate that discussion, but moving forward, I think 2 of the 3 parcels, to enter into the reuse phase, there has to be an owner to put those deed restrictions on. So through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Thomas or Mr. Geary, I'm not sure who would facilitate or initiate that discussion, but I don't think it's too soon to do it.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Mayor. It's a point very well taken. And we had a conversation among local, regional, state, and federal government officials some weeks back in mid-February, and this was a major topic of conversation. And it's, again, why, in response to Councilor Kennedy's question about catalyst projects, I believe this has to be one on the city's radar because there's no one else capable of doing this. As those parcels are in tax title foreclosure, with the city's inability to wipe away tax debt outside of the tax foreclosure process, it's almost certain that the city will be the owner of at least the portions for which we propose redevelopment. I know there are ongoing discussions about federal and/or state ownership of the groundwater system in those parcels, and I honestly am not certain how that will work, but for where we're proposing redevelopment, it would likely almost certainly be a tax title foreclosure through the city, which both wipes out the back tax debt, which is, we can't hope to collect, obviously, for that site, and it absolves the city for immediate environmental liability for the contamination on site.
So the city an option is to take the property and take ownership of those parcels to proceed with that? Oh, okay.
Yes, there's an option.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from my colleagues, the council, on this subcommittee? What is the wish of this body?
Should we move to the second item on the agenda?
Yeah. Did you want to make a motion to refer it to the council for a full presentation, or?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Second, so moved. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So voted. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Second item on the agenda is to discuss the city parking ordinance tonight. So we have several businesses here in the audience, and we also have Mr. Troop here, the parking director. Mr. Troop, if you could please come to the podium. Mr. Manager, go ahead.
If I may, I think there was an earlier memo sent out by prior Assistant City Manager Adam Bakey, kind of outlining what the process may be to look at this this parking ordinance. I don't think it's been addressed in quite some time, and I think it's kind of an important element to address it now and kind of change how we're kind of look at the parking in the downtown area. And his suggestion was that he's gone, there've been some review of certain areas in different parts of the country, and there may be some structured pricing schemes and different ways to develop the downtown. I think the idea is to for the residential, for the retail and for the restaurants, is to have it within a 2-block area where you can get to when you're parking and stuff, and to kind of turn over that parking into the downtown. And to kind of structure people that are parking down there in a longer period of time, get them into garages or into sites that are kind of adjusted for that thing, for that element. So his recommendation at the time, Mr. Bakey, was, instead of just kind of going at it piecemeal, take a look at the whole ordinance and get a consultant in there to take a look at, how we can approach this and in a different element to establish an ordinance that will be beneficial mostly to the businesses down there, because I think that's the main objective. And also there's a revenue element to it as well, but you can play both with each other. And again, our focus is on betterment for the businesses down there, and it can be done in such a way that I think people will be pleased with it, and it could work effectively as it does in other areas of the country. There was a memo that Mr. Troop will address it. He sent you in terms of his review that he's done since the beginning of the year, and I'll put it on to him right now to kind of talk about that element of it as well.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. But before I hand it over to Mr. Troop now, Mr. Troop, this motion stems from jobs that were posted in Human Resources regarding 2 meter enforcement officials that the hours were 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And then I, as a downtown businessman, was inundated with businesses and residents in fear of, and I'm sure the council heard other complaints as well, of, meter maids were going to be tagging cars until 6 p.m. So I am the maker of this motion, and that is the inspiration behind it. So can we please get an explanation from you? That'd be great.
When I saw this motion, I actually welcomed the review. And I do think that Mr. Bakey's recommendation should be heard and accepted to look at the motion. The intent of hiring additional meter enforcement with the 10 to 6 shift wasn't necessarily to focus on the downtown area and metered area. If in the long range of the wishes of the city, wishes of the council, was to enforce the meters until 6 o'clock, then so be it, would be easily able to adjust. The intent to hire outside to the 6 o'clock hour was to better enforce the other parking ordinances that have come under our scope, such as the reserved dwelling, such as residential parking stickers, such as visitor permits. And to be able to do that, would be able to administer the applications, but we'd also be able to go out into the field and into the neighborhoods and make sure that resident stickers are parking in residential areas. That's where the majority of the complaints come. People returning from work and not having a place to park because there are not residential stickers on cars in the neighborhoods. So the intent wasn't necessarily to focus on the downtown meters. It was actually to broaden the scope of our enforcement and to better serve the residential areas.
Well, I'm pleased to see the intent of, but you have to understand how businesses and residents perceive this. The last thing businesses, not only in the downtown, throughout the city, can ill afford meter maids out till 6 p.m.
Sure.
So there was quite a buzz going on at the time, and I personally, I'm only one vote, but I feel that would be very, very detrimental. I understand what you're trying to accomplish on enforcing residentials and that, and I think, that can still be accomplished. But again, in the name of businesses, again, throughout the city, not only in the downtown, this is the last thing they and we can all need right
And
now.
I think, as
so.
Mr. Troop indicated, it's a perfect opportunity that's come forward to us to look at this parking ordinance, because I think it's been some time since it's been addressed, and I think we've got to look at it in the whole scope of what we want to do downtown and kind of rebrand that parking down there to benefit the businesses. That's the bottom line. I think they ought to be benefited, and I think there can be a plan that can be structured to accommodate that. And that we have that as the goal. I think we could achieve that goal. Mr. Bakey's memo suggests a consultant that they're using now, which I guess is a pretty well a well-known consultant and very good at what they do. They're working on the two-way element on Market Street, and that part of their chore has been that. Mr. Bakey suggested that we look at that in terms of maybe expanding their scope to include a review of the parking ordinances, to answer questions that we may have on it. And I guess another critical element of it is, Mr. Troops informed me that it will come out of the parking enterprise fund and wouldn't have to dip into the general fund. I think that while they're here, I think if we can just change the scope of their contract slightly, have it funded by the parking enterprise, it really is well worth the time to take a look at it now with an expert, with the consultant that it's so highly regarded, and with an individual that they know pretty well down there to begin with. So I think the extension on them won't be too burdensome, and I think it will be very beneficial for our purposes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Manager. I do agree in many aspects of that. But we have to understand why, being a businessman and hearing the input from several businesses downtown, I'm seem to be the one that they go to on this issue. Not that doesn't make me any smarter than my colleagues, just with being downtown, I hear much more than they do. But, we have to understand, these kiosks citywide read 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., and we're not enforcing until 6 p.m. The meter maids go home at 4, but it seems in select areas of the city, such as Middlesex Street, where there's a lot of activity, where the registry is, we're tagging there until 6, where there's a lot of activity. That's what I'm getting in reports from businesses in that area. Elliott's Hot Dogs, the Club Fitness Center, just to name a few in that area, that meter maids are out there till 6 p.m., and it's not fair to them. It's, it's not something we can just do in target areas. To me, that's using tickets as a revenue generator. That's what I perceive out of this, and that's not the way how I want to go about creating revenue. So and you will hear from several of the businesses here tonight on that issue too. So I think it's borderline. We're misrepresenting ourselves, quite frankly. People are putting money in. I know we all like additional revenue, absolutely. And no one is opposed to that. But it's borderline fraudulent what we're doing. We're saying one thing and we're not enforcing it. We're doing another. But again, only in select areas where there's activity. So, Mr. Troop, your comments here before I have my colleagues weigh in on the issue.
If there is ticketing going on Middlesex Avenue outside of 4 o'clock, I would like to know about it, and I can assure you that it is not coming from our meter enforcement officers, first and foremost. Secondly, the existing ordinance does read 8 to 6, and the signs reflect the existing ordinance. But again, as Acting Manager Geary mentioned, I think that this is a tremendous opportunity to really rebrand the parking department and to better serve the downtown businesses. Your argument is not unique. It's very common amongst business owners in metered parking areas in cities throughout the country. And that's why, again, I recommend taking a look at the entire ordinance and hearing the recommendations of people that have conducted these surveys in cities like Portsmouth, cities like Lawrence, cities like Haverhill, cities like Nashua. And they've come back and actually worked with the business owners and made the presentation to show how proper enforcement actually improves the businesses for the downtown residences. It seems to be a general consensus that actually proper enforcement, maybe even added enforcement, might actually help the residences. Again, I plan on following the wishes of council. That's why I'm here. I understand that. But if we could tie in, maybe rebrand the parking department and help the businesses, even tie into the businesses downtown, I think that everybody would benefit from it, including your business, including the others that are here tonight. But I obviously look forward to their feedback and hope that I can better serve them.
Thank you, Mr. Troop. Comments? Mr. Rourke?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm all for the idea of taking a look at it, reopening the ordinance and doing what's best for both the neighborhoods and the downtown. I appreciate, Mr. Troop, you mentioning the neighborhoods. There's a motion on this evening's agenda by Council Belanger and I concerning neighborhood parking ordinance as well. So any idea with both neighborhoods and downtown in mind by review of the ordinance, I'd be in full support of. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Manager, what you think is that we should use this motion as an opportunity to just review the entire ordinance and just to see if there are any changes that we can make that would be beneficial. Is that right?
I think it's a great opportunity because, first of all, I don't think the ordinance has been looked at for quite some time. I think things have changed downtown a little bit, maybe significantly, and I think it's just time we'll gather input, the consultant will gather input from the businesses down there, and it's just an opportunity. I think it's an open field that we can lay a plan in there that'll benefit. And I know my concern is that business element down there because they're the engine, and we all know that. So I think there's an opportunity here to start. I think we can basically the oyster, the world's our oyster here, and we can really kind of fashion it the way we want to fashion it, and we have some examples that throughout the country that are working quite well, and I think Lowell can be no different.
Thank you. And to the parking director, do you have anything on revenue? For instance, what are we taking in revenue, say, per month?
Well, interestingly, our budget is about $823,000 projected for revenue. I looked at it today, and we are right on par with that. In fact, I think it'll probably be about $840,000 in on-street parking for the year. So we will exceed the budget. It's a little bit lower than last year, but we did have the kiosk transition where we weren't able to collect revenues on the streets in the areas that they did transition. But the revenue that I actually tracked, if I may add, has been outside of the shifts that are normally enforced through meter enforcement. And to date, and this is up to yesterday, we have taken in $31,200 outside of normal meter enforcement hours. That's after 4 o'clock, Monday through Friday, and all days on weekends. The trend now is that it's going up daily. We average about $400 a day, and that works out to be a little bit more than 17% of our total revenue for on-street.
Okay. Where does that revenue come from?
That revenue comes from people that are paying the meters.
Even though there's no enforcement?
Correct.
During
Yes,
that
sir.
time? Okay, so that's the additional amount that you're getting.
Yes, sir.
But just on average, monthly, what does the parking department take in? What amount would it be? Do I just take 840,000 and divide by 12?
I think that's a reasonable assumption.
Okay. And what about, how much of that is, or what percentage is taken in by the garages as compared to the meters or the kiosks?
The garages are significantly more than that. The exact number, I wasn't prepared to give you the total revenue for the garages. I just had the on-street number. I could pull that up and get that to you.
Okay. And because of the software that we have, you can almost tell me how much every single meter takes in, couldn't you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so the new meters that we put in on Father Morissette, how are they doing?
Not very well.
Okay. Do you know why aren't they doing well?
Well, nobody is really parked there, so there's no need. So, we understand the need to try to get people to park there. We're looking at talking to people like UMass Lowell. We're looking at talking to people like Farley White, some of the residences in that area to try to market those spaces accordingly so that we do get people parking there. There is some interest. Now that we're out of the winter, we're hoping that those agreements can come into place very soon.
When the council voted to do that, to put those meters in, the administration argued that we would be spending a lot of money up front, but that we would recapture that money in, 3 or 5 years or something like that. So, but what you're saying is that's really not working out so far. Now, before the manager left, I had asked him about that, and he indicated that the meters have only been there for a short time, and I agree that they have. But I guess what I was expecting was that once the meters went in, that they'd be welcomed and that there'd be a lot of people parking there, but that hasn't been the case.
No, that hasn't been the case. The most usage we find is during events. That's when people are going there, events at the Songus. But like I said, they've been there through the winter. We've had a tough winter with snow and everything like that, and they aren't very attractive right now. They may be attractive, again, looking at some agreements that might be in place with the university, with Farley White, with anybody in those Mills area. We're hoping to get people to park there now that the weather's getting much better.
How would we do that?
Again, they've expressed the need, Farley White specifically, to supplement their parking in the AOC garage. So they see a specific need. Some development with the university, they've already approached about the use of the spaces on Father Morissette themselves. So again, we're looking at trying to make the agreements happen with them very soon.
Okay. Let me ask you, I just have two other things, I think. But one of the things that you mentioned was that by educating the people who have property and who are retailers downtown, they can better understand why the parking meters are beneficial to them. I've been in, over the past several years, different communities, and in some of the communities in their central business district, they offer 2 hours free parking. And I assume they do that to try to enhance people to come in and shop. If you can shop for 2 hours, and maybe you're gonna stay longer and then you pay. But do you see the benefit of that, or is that, do you think that's what do you think about that?
Well, I haven't experienced anything like that, so I don't necessarily know how that may or may not benefit the downtown businesses.
Burlington, Vermont does it.
Sure.
For one.
But again, in my time here, in my history in the parking industry, I haven't seen that. In the solicitation of some of the people in the New England Parking Council, to which I'm a member, they seem to be fairly unanimous that the benefit of paid meters in a city like Lowell are definitely in favor and help out the downtown businesses. They haven't recommended offering two hours free. But again, I think if we brought in an expert to take a look at it and maybe to ask that specific question, I would love to listen to their recommendations.
Okay. And in your comments, one of the things that you mentioned, the term you used was proper enforcement. And so are the people that give out the parking tickets, or that go around and so forth, what type of training do they have? And do you hold regular meetings with your department? In other words, before everybody goes out there for the morning to try to get as much money as they can, do you give them a pep talk, or is there like a little strategy, or, let's focus on John Street today, or whatever?
We try to reinforce any of the wishes of the police, any recommendations that come in from, the outside skirts. But for the most part, they're focusing on the downtown and scheduled routes that have been in place well before I came into this position. And again, I think that in hiring the new meter enforcement officer, it creates an opportunity to maybe redevelop some of the routes or recreate some of the routes, and to offer a little bit more of a change, because I only have a staff of 3. They're in the same areas on a 6-week cycle, so every 18 weeks they're going through 3 different areas. And again, I think that this is a tremendous opportunity to look at just what you just suggested.
So as far as training, it's mostly on the job as you...
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. I guess part of proper enforcement, it seems to me, is paying attention to the retailers that are down there. And some of them, and let me just pick Elliott's just because it is a good example for me. Elliott's Hot Dogs has been there for a long, long time. And the people that go there tend to be there, I would think, for probably 15 minutes, maybe 20 if they're with a bunch of people. But they're there on the short term. It's a little tiny operation, and if there's people that are going to get a parking ticket when they go there, then it makes it be, they maybe won't go back right away. What do you think about that? And there's other areas. I think that on Middlesex Street, we've heard comments recently about the health club that's there. But other places, particularly where, what comes to mind is places where people are in and out, and they're not going to be there for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Well, the only comments I would have on that are that the new kiosks really only replaced existing mechanical meters. There are some new areas, but Elliott Street isn't one of them. There were always mechanical meters there, down on Middlesex Ave, things like that. Where we added new meters, we've seen tremendous growth in the past years. It was a recommended area that needed metered parking in the kiosks. So we did add some meters, but we don't have enough information yet and the results to see the effect that those meters had in those areas. And Father Morissette is obviously one of them.
Okay. I guess I'm saying something a little bit different. I guess, let me just be quite blunt about the whole thing, is I guess I think that I would be okay, for one, if a meter maid was, if they were doing Elliott Street, or where Elliott's Hot Dogs were, for instance, if they went by and there was somebody there and they were in violation, that maybe you give them a pass the first time, and when you go back, if they're still there, then you would give them a ticket. But just to have a little leeway, not just with them, I'm giving them as an example, but I think with a lot of retailers, I think it's really hard for people downtown. It's hard, it's a struggle, and that's kind of that's why this is on the agenda, is because it's a struggle. So I have come to appreciate the amount of revenue that your department brings in, but at the same time, that revenue will all dry up if we have no stores left, and there's no reason to go downtown.
Again, all the more reason to maybe take a look at it and hear some recommendations. As a practice, meter enforcement does not issue warnings. It's really a black and white situation when it comes to issuing a ticket. If I gave them that leeway, I think that there would be complete chaos on the streets. But again, we'd never take away the right for somebody to appeal a ticket. When there are cases, if somebody comes in and has some mitigating circumstances that would warrant it to be voided, by all means, we hear those mitigating circumstances and judge accordingly.
For some people, it's difficult to appeal a ticket because of the time that it takes. And if you're, for some people, that just doesn't, it's easy to just pay the ticket.
Sure, that would be a question actually for the hearings officer. I believe she does render a decision without the person being present, but again, I can't answer for her.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor. I'm going to open up to the public very, very briefly. We do have a regular scheduled hearing tonight. I'll allow for one speaker who would like to come up, and then I'll open up to my colleagues after that. Ms. Bell.
Yes, a couple of things very quickly. $30,000 on the outside times that are being collected by these meters without enforcement. Putting on new personnel to then therefore enforce that would cost much more than $30,000 in that time. When you look at benefits, you look at vacations, you look at et cetera. So looking at what it's going to take for personnel to do this, to get this small amount of money, is one question. Next is, you mentioned Haverhill, you mentioned other destination types of cities, and the majority of those that you mentioned do not have meters downtown, and they do those 2-hour meters. Let me go on further. I spoke to over 50 businesses in Lowell, in the kind of downtown area. I collected signatures from more than 50 businesses and over 300 people, residents in Lowell. And I have those, and you're welcome to see them, et cetera, and I'll submit them afterwards. George, Seasons 4. The city council gave him a citation for being in here for 25 years, okay? 4 Seasons, rather, Portuguese restaurant. Okay, Scott Plath from Cobblestones, Anna from La Beniche, Richard from Ricardo's. Every single one of those people said, fine for daytime enforcement. They've lost their lunch crowd anyway. But you hit them at 4:30, that's when they start getting their reservations. That's when somebody comes from a business, their own business, and then they stop for something to eat, drink, et cetera. That kind of entertainment. Now, if you look at Lowell as being a destination city, we are not there yet. I would love to see Lowell have to have enforcement at night if we became that kind of city like Portsmouth, New Hampshire. We're not there. So now you have these small, very small businesses, mainly restaurants and other types of entertainment businesses, They're not fighting with the courthouse for parking. They're not fighting with Middlesex Community College for parking. What they're fighting with is they are fighting with that whole perception of, am I going to get a ticket if I go down to Lowell to have a meal? They have been here, they are anchors. If we look at the city of Lowell as being a mall, which it isn't, but if we look at it, you have several anchors, and those anchors happen to all be restaurants. Okay? I look at myself as an anchor only because I have over 2,000 members who use my facility, et cetera, so we have a very, very busy part of the city, and I pay a lot of taxes. So, but you could lose me and not change the face of the city. You can't lose a Cobblestones and a La Beniche and a Ricardo's. And those are the anchors, and that's where you have to fill in with those other businesses. Chantilly Place left. Why? Parking. Okay? They left because of parking. So you do need parking enforcement. George at Four Seasons said to me, I really need the meter maids until 4 o'clock because I'm fighting everybody coming to the courthouse and parking all day long. So you do need that kind of enforcement, but I don't believe you need it after 4 o'clock. I really don't. And you certainly don't need it on Saturday when we're trying to get people from a mall or from Andover where they don't have meters, or from Nashua, where parts of Nashua they don't have meters. Haverhill, no meters. So make us a destination city. Stop putting it on the backs of these small businesses, and maybe we can then get other businesses into the city and then have more revenue, all of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Bell. You may approach the bench. We'll hand those signatures into the record. Thank you very much. Any other comments, my colleagues? Brief comments? Councilor Rourke?
A review of the ordinance?
I mean, if it's the wish of the council, we could send it up, coming out of a subcommittee report tonight, we could set it up for, to have the law department review the matter and come back with some reports and recommendation and have it back before the committee.
Mr. Chairman, it would be a good idea. I can put it back on the Economic Development Subcommittee list.
Okay. Any
Just one quick element, I mean, I think we ought to do the consultant element of that first, though, in terms of if the body is willing to do that, get that information, and then use that information to help develop, a more precise ordinance.
Councilor Martin?
Yeah, so I would make that motion that we proceed with the recommendation here to further study this whole issue with the eye toward, how do we best, well, it says it right in the recommendation, but how we best serve the needs of the downtown businesses and residents. I think since we went to the kiosk system, I mean, I'm downtown every day too, and you could never find a place to park on the street. Now you can. And I think if there's an opportunity to make improvements in the nighttime like we did in the daytime, I think that would be welcomed by everybody. So I think it's worth the look, and I'd move that we follow the recommendation, at least undertake that study before we, jump to do any sort of additional enforcement or anything like that.
Is that a motion, Councilor?
Yes, so moved.
Second?
Hey, I'll second the motion, but I'd like to speak on the
Yep.
motion.
Okay.
I think if we're gonna have a consultant, it's gonna cost money. That's probably what the subcommittee wants to do, is recommend it to the full council, and that the council probably is rather than just the subcommittee, should be the one that would take a vote on doing that. Don't you think that, Mr. Manager?
Yeah, I agree that it's a money matter. It will come out of the parking enterprise fund. Mr. Choops informed me that there's money available for that, such a consultant, and it won't touch the general fund.
Does the maker of the motion have any argument with that? No? I need a second? Okay. Okay, second. So voted. All in favor, say aye. All in opposition? Opposition? So voted. Motion, second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Motion adjourned.